So we are going to continue the conversation that we stopped at, because that was about elections. This time round, we talk about elections and what did the elections really do. And although it won't be a great giveaway, not much, but we're going to break down this entire process. So Professor Behera needs no introduction, and yet it is my responsibility as a host to do it. He has been looking at Pakistan from different prisms, not just security, and he has been widely cited. He's written influential papers which have been looked at by security establishment in South Asia, but also in the United States. And it is not just security, but also sort of an institutional role and capacity that the Pakistan state has been one of the things that he has focused on. With this very, very short but inadequate description, we're going to jump right into the conversation. With your permission, Professor.
Thank you very much for that invitation, and I look forward to the discussion.
Right. So we have our chair, Mr. Jung, with us, who has been very interested in the elections on Pakistan. And we have you. And we stopped last time round, a couple of days before the election. And at that point of time, you made a very interesting statement. I think it was just as we were signing off. You said that the people in Pakistan could vote two ways. A, they could either not come out at all to vote because the elections were a foregone conclusion, and they would not give the satisfaction to the establishment of kowtowing to an election that they had rigged, for lack of a better word. Or second, they could come out in large numbers and vote for a person who was behind Mars and his political party, even without the symbol, even with all of the things that were happening. And you also said that PTI and PPP could come together and perhaps form a government. The elections have been over. Government has been formed. And the second thing that you predicted happened. How do you see the election overall?
Yeah, well, at that point of time, we could only talk about possibilities regarding the outcome of the results. And one of the possibility was that, significant changes have taken place in Pakistan. And one of those possibilities was that Imran's support base, which seems to have grown, and it's now fairly evident that the support base has grown, actually took the opportunity of the elections to send a message, not only support for Imran, but send a message essentially to the indifference of the military in the governance process and the kind of repression it was carrying out against Imran and his party, the PTI. At that time, it was speculation, it was possibilities, but at the same time, one knew that the pre-poll rigging and all would essentially ensure that even if PTI members managed to get a majority, which is what happened eventually, they would not be in a position to form a government because of them being stripped of the electoral symbol. They could not actually have claim to make the government, and that's the reason why post-elections, they had to tie up with some party. And this is where I think, the politics of Imran has created a problem in Pakistan. Imran probably does not recognize the kind of dynamics that is set into the Pakistani polity. And that is that somewhere, the PTI has to work with the other political parties. This is something which, Imran seems to be, or thinks that he's a lone crusader and he has the solutions to Pakistan's problem. He will get rid of corruption, etc., etc. But what he doesn't realize is that the fractured nature of the mandate, and somewhere, he has to work with others. And that's the reason why I thought that there is one possibility where, the PTI, given the fact that it might be wanting to get away from the alliance with the PML, might reach out to the PTI, and the PTI might seize the opportunity. But that's not what happened, because obviously, Imran has painted the opposition in a certain color. He does not want to deal with anyone because, as he says, they're dynast or corrupt. So that element is missing in Pakistani politics, something that we can talk about later. But that is where one should have actually thought through this, that Imran's politics will become a barrier to the formation of a government between a coalition government of the PTI and the PPP.
So, Professor, when we talk about, just to stay on this slightly more, what do you think is going to happen in terms of, I'm going to ask you to think about the first day of the session that happened when the new government was sworn in. Shehbaz Sharif became the prime minister. And yet, in a country which has a million pressing problems, which the new government has to solve, the caretaker government was very successful. But at the end of the day, a caretaker government is just that, a caretaker government. The first couple of days of the assembly could not be held because the members on the other side, with the symbol, without the symbol, they can form the government if they can't form the government. But they disrupted the proceedings, going as much as I saw some of the visuals, shouting obnoxious names, even expletives, against the members of the ruling coalition. So, what I want to understand largely is that you've explained very well the Imran Khan sized question mark in the Pakistani polity. But what about the exclamation mark of the young people who voted in these politicians for some sort of a change? And yet, what they're getting are nothing but, for lack of a better word, cinema antics.
That's an interesting expression. Well, Pakistan politics has been like that, I mean, it's fairly colorful. I mean, like Indian politics, of course, in a different sense. But also, Pakistan politics is also much more volatile. And in the recent past, what one is noticing is the divisiveness between the political parties has actually gone up significantly. Here I might take you a little back to an important development that had taken place in 2006 with the signing of a Charter of Democracy between the PPP and the PML. It was signed between Benazir Bhutto and Nawaz Sharif. There was a recognition between them. I mean, after General Musharraf had ruled, that unless and until the political parties could come together, I mean, it would be very difficult to keep the military out of politics. So the Charter of Democracy, in some senses, brought the PPP and PML together, which subsequently, if you see, I mean, they have been in number of coalition governments, and even now you see that it's a coalition government between the PPP and PML. But the uh, differences between the political parties and the kind of language they use against the others, uh, that cordiality is missing. I mean, it's to a certain extent you find that there is some bonhomie between the PPP and PML, but the PTI, and partly I think it's Imran Khan himself who uses the kind of language against the other political leaders. You don't find that kind of understanding that essentially you are political rivals. You're not enemies. But somewhere, that's not how they look at each other, and that is the reason why the debates, the discourse, the political debates, the political discourse have all gone down. You don't find, um, I mean, parliamentary debates in Pakistan are certainly not, at the best. It's not that they don't have good speakers. It's not that they don't have still a lot of politicians who, who can stand up as good intellectuals. But overall, there's a decline. The question that you asked about, what is it that the youth is voting for? I mean, if this is what they're voting for. Now, this is actually an expression of, a combination of demographic change in Pakistan and populism. That Imran's politics has essentially been very populist, since his, I mean, he's essentially increased his strength, his political constituency over a period of time, and created a support base of, very interestingly, of right, left, of the middle class, the lower classes, the professional classes, the urban youth, and largely amongst women. So it's an eclectic mix of a support base that he's created, which eventually has helped increase his political strength, the electoral victories is getting. But this also has resulted, I mean, that mobilization has also been on the basis of certain populism, meaning he has been promising a lot of things without, any kind of actual plans to achieve them. I mean, economically, he promised a welfare state when he came into power last time. But he didn't have a proper economic agenda. I mean, in fact, he oversimplified Pakistan's problems. That is something which I think, maybe gelling with the kind of support base he has, who actually don't understand the challenges or problems of Pakistan. I mean, these challenges are essentially very difficult. And therefore, simple solutions like, how to get rid of corruption. You can put the corrupt leaders behind bars and Pakistan's problems will be solved. These kind of things, which essentially is what is increasing his support base. But the positive aspect of that, which I think came out in the electoral mandate this time, was that to a large extent, Imran also was seen as someone who's now standing up to the military. This is one of the messages out of the electoral mandate of 2024. That, and this is something which I had always had a feeling right from the time he got elected that the kind of maverick he is, uh, he will have a fallout with the military. So initially, I mean, people called it a hybrid regime. Imran didn't have a problem with the military, but eventually, there was a fallout because the military didn't want any kind of interference from him in the functioning of the military. Also, a lot on policy decisions. And one of the concerns of the military for some time, in fact, I think that concern gets accelerated under Imran's rule, is the declining economy. Because it's in the interest of the military itself that, there has to be a regime in power which has to deal with the economic problem. And Imran was not showing any signs that, he actually could deal with the economic challenges that in fact, the economy deteriorated under him. So the 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 people who voted for Imran but saw Imran as someone unlike the others, unlike the other political leaders of the political parties, someone who's standing up the military, which suggests that essentially that I mean, a lot of Pakistanis do not want the role of the military to be diminished, and looking for ways out. And probably this was one opportunity to do that, because you don't find that kind of articulation. Um, I mean, in the media and all, which is very limited. The anger against the military, or essentially an understanding that the military has been very damaging to the country's politics. So I mean, this I see as a positive development, that there is now what one can call a vocalization of opposition to the military, that the more and more common people are looking for ways to speak against the military. And this election was one way of sending a message to the military that you can use all the repression against Imran, but they're still going to stand behind Imran. But does that change anything? The question you asked, that why this kind of behavior in the parliament, I don't see that changing much. I mean, there will be some points where there will be some kind of soberness, where you realize that this cannot continue for long. It would have other repercussions. But yes, we will see such behavior also in the future. Nothing to, I mean, we cannot expect radically, different kind of culture within the parliament in Pakistan. Yeah, Amogh.
So this is very interesting, as when we think about this entire situation, when we think about political institutions, when we think about the custodian of a democracy, Election Commission of Pakistan has really taken a beating in this one. So how do you see this state with 200 million people, pretty small area, with troubles on the neighborhood? And we are going to come to the troubles in the neighborhood and the role that the security forces are playing or not playing. But a key, and this is not the first time, it's not the first time that the Election Commission of Pakistan has been named as not being absolutely independent. But this time around, the way the election was contested and the way the credibility of the institution has been besmirched. How do you see the continued question? Because you mentioned the Charter on Democracy. The Charter on Democracy can be between parties, but if the compact between the state and the people breaks down, in it, that people refused to accept that the elections can be held openly with transparency. The people of Pakistan have been very tolerant of their rulers. They take it for granted that some amount of election fraud is going to happen at some point of time. But this time round, even before the votes were counted, we saw videos circulated of tampering happening. We saw videos circulating of results being changed. We saw videos circulating of people getting into, and this was not circulated with a lot of rage. We actually tried doing an analysis of it using certain tools. Half of it was just ironical. And of course, people were angry. But then the compact between the state and the people has broken down. And it's no longer just focused on one specific group. It has now gone beyond that one group. The Punjabis are equally as miffed as the Pashtunis. How do you see this decay in one specific corner of the Pakistani state?
I don't think it's a decay in one specific corner or the election commission. See, there is a supervisory role that the judiciary also plays. And unfortunately, the judiciary has also succumbed in many instances. So the composition of the election commission in Pakistan, where right now you have a bureaucrat as the chief election commissioner, is Mr. Sultan Raza. His background, his background is such that the military would have greater control over him. He comes from a background of a landed family with links to the military. So, you can still have, people who can stand up to the military or, act independent of the military. But that's not been the case in this case. And that was not the case also in the 2018 election, where the election commission was clearly involved in, a whole lot of pre-poll rigging. Now, that 2018 and 2024, both these two elections have, one can say, that the election commission has been responsible to a great extent in not ensuring, a free and fair election. In fact, one can go to the extent of saying that, in fact, it was instrumental in ensuring in this election that the PTI did not have a fair opportunity. But then what one also noticed is the judiciary, whenever cases went to the judiciary, particularly on the electoral symbol issue, I remember I think the Peshawar High Court actually restored the electoral symbol to the PTI, the cricket bat. And the Supreme Court, upturned that decision. So, if the Supreme Court is able to play a more independent role and act as a kind of in some supervisory capacity, keeping the election commission in check, maybe you will have some kind of institutional arrangements. If these institutions do not have the capacity to function independently, and maybe one of the reasons for that is also the persons holding the posts, to what extent they would be able to exercise of their authority independently. So this problem is there in Pakistan, which is something which is not going to go away. We'll have to deal with it. I mean, going from here now, you will still have the same election commission. You will still have the same judiciary. You may be lucky to have a chief justice who's completely, either a daredevil or someone who can, manage things well and be more independent in the kind of judgment they give. But this is essentially an institutional problem. This is an institutional problem which is which is not going to go away anytime soon in the context of Pakistan.
So let me take one step away from this, get back to the military. But we are going to hold on this conversation about institutions because this is a conversation about macro institutions. Because last year there was this feeling that at some point of time, the elections are going to happen and a lot is going to change because of the elections, except people who knew Pakistan, South Asia, were pretty clear that nothing is going to change. And I think the Americans also finally came around to that view. But let's talk about the man in the middle, the guy that the Kaptan Saab's follower called Jarnail Saab, the general, Munir. He's been on the job since November 2022. Unlike his predecessor, he does not take the center stage. But by all accounts, he is as powerful as the last one. It'll be a mistake on anybody's part to think that he has somehow shed some of his role and responsibility and some of that power. Just after the elections, in one case just before the elections, the intensity of violence increased. And everybody thought that perhaps when the elections are over, the violence is going to come down, stabilize. But that has not happened. I mean, just after the elections, the Iranians and the Pakistanis have had their own misadventures. And they have followed it up with more misadventures, this time on the diplomacy circuit. Then the Taliban and the Pakistanis have continued to have their misadventure. TTP is continuing to make inroads into Pakistan. And there was a very interesting quote that came out, and I'm quoting this from memory. I'm trying to keep it verbatim. Aslam Munir said that for the security of even one citizen of Pakistan, the entire of Afghanistan be damned. This is in quotes. And yet, to catch a phrase from political scientist Ishtiaq Ahmed, who called Pakistan a garrison state, the garrison is crumbling all around us because they're our neighbors. And I'm now going to ask you a slightly hypothetical question, but also one where your training and your deep research into the state. Is there a possibility that we cease to see Pakistan as one state in the next 15 to 20 years? Are we somehow getting to some sort of a 1971 moment for Pakistan again?
Amogh, it'll be very difficult to, look ahead 15 years, but at least, let's look right now. What's the problem or the challenges Pakistan has and how serious it is? I mean, I think what you're asking is, why is it that the Pakistan military is not able to deal with this problem of terrorism or insurgency? I think Pakistan has right now a very serious challenge. And in our last conversation, I think this question came up as to you know, why are there more attacks? And, my reflection on that was obviously, the military uh, has not clearly formulated a plan to deal with that. I also predicted that there would be more such attacks, and in fact, that's happening. In fact, in the last week, we've had several attacks by the TTP. But I think that's something which the Pakistanis either do not understand or do not want to recognize. I would go by the second statement that actually they don't want to recognize that they do have a serious problem from the TTP. Overall, on one side, the challenge that they have had from the Baluch nationalists, that's been continuing for quite some time. And the Baluch nationalists, given the kind of limited resources they would have, not that the motivation is not high, they're highly motivated, but obviously, resources wise, they're not as endowed as probably the TTP or the other groups like Al Qaeda and all. So the Baluch nationalists like the BLA and all have been have been able to, and there are reasons why they've been attacking, particularly the projects funded by the Chinese. They essentially want to ensure that the Chinese leave. There is an issue of land in Balochistan. The Baloch are completely isolated, not part of the kind of development that are happening. The Gwadar port, if um, completely manned by Chinese workers. There are no Pakistani workers in the Gwadar fort. So the Baluch is not benefiting from all these development projects and all. Plus, obviously, they see this all as land colonization. Now, given the terrain, the Baluch nationalists can create a lot of problems for the military, which they've been doing by targeting the military directly. The TTP is a much more serious problem. And the reasons why I was predicting that the attacks by the TTP is only going to increase, because since the Taliban came into power in Kabul, we see that the TTP has been empowered. Why? And this is where, when I said that the Pakistanis do not want to recognize this, they have all survived because of, the support they got from the Pakistani military establishment itself. Now, even when, Pakistan was carrying out various military operations against the TTP around 2014, 16, they would simply go into Afghanistan and take shelter there. Second, something which again is not being discussed today is the number of peace accords that the Pakistan government signed with the leaders of these kind of groups. They've signed agreements with Naik Mohammed. They've signed agreements with Baitullah Masood. And a lot of these TTP leaders were killed essentially by the Americans, by drone strikes and all. The Pakistanis do not have the support of the military support from the United States today. At some certain point of time, the United States has helped them in, neutralizing a lot of these leaders. But the point I was trying to make is that it is essentially the policies of the government or the military establishment which ensure that these groups, even if they become defunct for a certain period of time, they still survive. And now, with the support of the Taliban, since it came to power, they've been empowered, and I mean their operations are in Pakistan. It's not very difficult for them to operate from Northwest Frontier Province, where at least 4 districts where they have a significant amount of support and influence, North Waziristan, South Waziristan, etc. So the uh, uh, the problem for the Pakistan government is that either it again launches kind of a massive military operation. But given the nature of the warfare, I mean, these are all guerrilla hit and run tactics. You attack here, there. It will not solve the problem. I mean, if the military launches, some military operations, they'll basically go into Afghanistan and sit quiet for some time. And they have the Pakistani government, which thought that they would be able to use the Taliban to rein in the TTP. That is also not working, because they very clearly said that, I mean, they actually support them. And the support is very clear, where, I mean, the leadership of Taliban, or the main leader of Taliban, Akhundzada, says that he supports, Islamic State in Pakistan, and that is what the Taliban also wants. So, you can have a limited amount of influence on Sirajuddin Haqqani, but even there, you haven't been able to make any difference. The Taliban has clearly said that it's between you two. We will not be involved in any kind of negotiations between the TTP and the Pakistan government. So I think Pakistan is in a bit of a spot. I don't think so. Military operations will do much. They're having a difficult time with the Taliban in Afghanistan. I mean, they've gone to the extent of both sides carrying out military operations across each other's borders. So, and there was a time when Pakistan had a certain benefit, that the presence of the United States forces, or the coalition forces in Afghanistan, was helpful. But now, that also is not there, because clearly the Taliban in Afghanistan is supporting and helping the TTP. And it's very clear, because what the news reports say that they are carrying weapons which is essentially been left by the Americans in Afghanistan. So how can they get weapons left by the Americans unless and until it is being given to them by the Taliban in Afghanistan? So Pakistan is going to have a bit of a tough time dealing with the TTP on one side and dealing with the BLA on the other side. I mean, it's going to be very stretched. But I wouldn't be surprised if very soon you might find some military operation, because I think there is quite a bit of a demand or expectation that the military now needs to get its act together and do something about and this clamor has started since the last week. The number of attacks which have taken place, this clamor is actually growing. So we are going to be seeing a fairly destabilized Pakistan for some time whenever the military operations begin.
Right. So now we shift back to institutions and elections. There's a famous Pakistani singer. His name is Shehzad Roy. He's also like some Pakistani singers and artists and cricketers, part-time into politics every once in a while. He had a song long time back called Laga Rahe. And one of the things, the song starts by there's a kid, and the kid then is looking at a television, and a person comes on the news and says that Pakistan Tariq ke nazuk mode se guzar raha hai. And then this kid grows up, and then another announcement happens. So this nazik mode has become the favorite place for Pakistan to be at the crossroads of history. And there is a very fascinating character in the middle of all of this. I mean, there are many, but there is one which is very hard to place. And that character is the current president of Pakistan, Asif Ali Zardari. Now, Mr. Zardari has been a minister, he's been a contractor, he's been reputedly a very good polo player, and he's also been a president of Pakistan in the past, after the assassination of his wife, Benazir Bhutto. Mr. Zardari at that point of time was instrumental in getting the Chinese to sign up for CPEC, and that's when the process started. He features quite a lot in WikiLeaks, I think more than any other establishment figure in Pakistan. Yeah, and he's also a guy who was caught in the middle of the operation to kill Osama bin Laden in Abbottabad. And then he had a very strange time of getting the Americans and the Pakistanis to work together. He's back in power as the president of Pakistan, technically a figurehead. But this time round, he is the president. His son heads a political party which is a coalition partner with their arch rivals, the Sharifs. Mr. Shehbaz Sharif is the prime minister. Mr. Nawaz Sharif is perhaps the leader of the entire thing, although unofficial. And Mr. Sharif's daughter is the chief minister of a very important province. How do you see the institutional nepotism that has become the Pakistani politics, and how do we analyze this? Like, how do we analyze this paradoxical relationship that is going to hopefully shape the next 5 years of Pakistan? Although if the records or history is anything to go by, we might see a falling out in around year 3. That's something we analyze. Apparently, year 3 is very bad for Pakistan. They just need to skip to year 4.
Yeah. See, it's, I mean, we know that the PPP and the PML are basically family parties, you know. I mean,
But Professor, they are family parties, but this is a family government, and not just at the federal level. It's now a family government at state level as well.
Yeah, that's because of the kind of bargaining that Zardari managed to do. And all said and done, I might say a few words about President Zardari. Despite whatever his reputation was in the past, his tenure as the president in Pakistan, where he managed to complete his tenure, despite falling out with the military, I think is a very important development milestone for Pakistan politics, where Zardari, without being confrontational with the military, was able to ensure that the military did not interfere. They were not able to throw him, and I think it was a very big victory that the PPP had or Zardari had. Second, as president also, he did not create any problems for the government. I mean, many across board also saw that, he was someone who was able to, bring people together or negotiate. Even now, during this period also, Zardari had a very important role to play. And even though people are saying, I mean, he's someone who has the money bag, so, he can go around buying buying the members of the National Assembly. Uh, uh, Obviously, I mean, that may also have happened. One doesn't know that. But his the reason why he's there as the president was the way he negotiated with the PML Nawaz, that even if the PPP would not be part of the government, uh, he ensured that he remained as the president. I think the reason why the PML would have also accepted it is because they must have realized that I mean, in the past, Jazari has not created problems for the PPP, sorry, for the PML, and he might be someone better to have there because it's better to have him there rather than someone else who would be a unknown entity. So that is how Jadari is there as the president. And mind you, the PPP does not have uh, anyone else from the Bhutto family in the government. Now it comes to the PML. Of course, the reason why you have Shehbaz Sharif as the prime minister and Mariam Nawaz as the chief minister in Punjab is something that eventually I think Nawaz Sharif decided because he did not want to head a coalition government. Um, so, and he wanted that Mariam Nawaz should become the chief minister of Punjab. So it was a kind of a compromise which he worked out. So he does not hold any office, but everyone knows that Nawaz Sharif would have a very important role to play, both at the federal government level as well as in the Punjab government. Probably, uh, he would still be very powerful, just being in parliament. But this is how Pakistani politics has been, particularly the PML. And one of the reasons for the decline of the PML, because the PML Nawaz following in Punjab, I don't have the figures, but it's the PTI which is essentially corroded the support base of the PML. And what is the reason? One of the reasons is this, that the PML doesn't look like a modern party, which is or which a party which is changing with the times. It's not taken to the social media too well, or it's not using the electronic media very well compared to what the PTI is doing. Maybe that's because a lot of youngsters in PTI have been very instrumental in taking to the social media. I mean, the PTI's campaign this time was almost all throughout the social media. So the PML looks a little ossified. It's not growing. It's not changing. And that is the reason why it is also losing its support base. I mean, by the end of it, it got 75 seats, which I think is just a little more than what they had in 2018. There could be other reasons why they've got that number, but this is hurting the PML in some ways, which is getting reflected or will get reflected in other elections also. I mean, given the fact that the election was so badly rigged, so obviously the PML still managed to get sufficient numbers in Punjab to form the government. But I mean, what you're saying, it's almost like become a family family government. That is how the I mean, this is where you have to look at the PML Nawaz, look at the PTI, and why the support is shifting towards the PTI. The support base that I talked about is essentially the younger crowd, professionals, urbans, who obviously, I mean, not very happy with the PML anymore. And even if some of them realize that Imran Khan is probably, I mean, he's a demagogue, he probably is more like a dictator, and yet they're willing to shift support to Imran Khan's populist policies than sticking around with parties like the PML. So one of the conclusions that one might draw from this election that I mean, earlier the PPP had almost become a party from Sindh. In this election, the PPP still managed to get some seats in the other three provinces. In this election, it is now increasingly looking like as if the PML Nawaz is becoming more a party from Punjab, losing its national character or influence in the other states. Now, these are directions in which the electoral outcomes are showing the changes in the nature of the party support bases, etc. One or two elections more, and we will see whether these are actually clear trends or these trends can change in subsequent elections also.
Professor,
So
meanwhile,
that's my reflection.
while I have you here, I just wanted to ask an additional question. And that is this. You reflected about the changing nature of voter demographic for these parties and the changing proportion. And I think that is fascinating. What about the religious parties? I mean, one of the biggest losers of the elections, if I might put it like this, were the religious parties. They are nowhere. In a state where technically the Islamization has been growing at an accelerated pace, people are falling people are falling out of love of religious parties as well. What does that show us about this? Is there something we can read into it?
No, that's a very interesting question because it relates to a larger, bigger problem. I mean, first, the religious parties have never had that kind of support in Pakistan. In the elections, they don't get, more than 3-4% of votes. And that's the reason why, they have a couple of seats here, there, so they can make a difference when coalition governments have to be formed and all. But they've not been dominant. They have not been
except in some provinces. They have been dominating certain provinces.
only in Northwest Frontier Province and
Yes.
Karachi.
Yes.
And Karachi. So, they get few seats here and there. But which basically means the Pakistani electorate has not been voting for religious parties. Has been either voting for left of center parties like the PPP or has been voting for right of center parties like the PML, and it's been voting for PTI, which has a very eclectic kind of ideological formulation with some kind of soft Islamism, which you can gather from Imran's views or articulation, or it may be also tactical. So they have voted for, populists like Imran Khan also. So the religious parties' lack of influence, actually, I think, is what is creating the problem in Pakistan for the rise of militant Islam. Uh, See, the thing is this, since partition, the Islamists have been trying to capture power in Pakistan. Pakistan was made for on the basis of Islam, which gave the impression to the Islamists that eventually, they will come into power. But that's not what happened. I mean, essentially, it behaved like a secular state, and in whatever ways we interpret Jinnah's that idea about there is no state religion, everyone is free to practice what they want to practice. But this thing about the ideological state where Islam remained important, um, which gave the fervor and hope to the Islamists that they would be able to come into power. But that over a period of time now it's very clear that they will not be able to come into power through elections, through a popular mandate. Now, what are you left with? I mean, if you cannot come to power on the basis of popular mandate, the only way is to use militant Islam or through capturing the state. And now with the rise of the Taliban and eventually, Taliban's capture of power in Afghanistan in 1996, first, uh, and now in 2021. So the Islamists in Pakistan have also been emboldened, or they take motivation from the fact that yes, um, Iran, the Islamists or the clergy rules in Iran, the Taliban rules in Afghanistan. So, I mean, many of them probably think that the Pakistan state is ripe for capturing, and that is the reason why the growth of the groups like TTP and all these groups essentially whatever the Taliban might have promised the Americans in the Doha Accord, that they will not support terrorist groups on Afghan soil. By the end of it, I mean, what we see is everyone is flourishing. Everyone is flourishing. The ISK, um, the Islamic State, Khorasan is also functioning from Afghanistan. The TTP is also functioning from Afghanistan. Al Qaeda is also apparently, now again strengthened. So by the end of it, all the Islamists will get together. And
I think ISIS Khorasan is very interesting. It is true that Al Qaeda and TTP can get together. I don't think ISIS Khorasan will find uh, an audience with Taliban and Al Qaeda because their war has been against these people as well. But sorry, please continue.
well, ISK, ISKP, it's on surface we get the impression, or the Taliban is against the ISKP. And we know that the ISKP has also, targeted the Taliban within Afghanistan. But they're still flourishing from within Afghanistan. I mean, how is that happening?
That is true. That is
So
true.
I don't have a clear answer to that. And we still haven't seen the ISKP's operations within Pakistan or extended beyond Pakistan. But even then, what the point I was trying to make is that if we imagine that the differences between these groups will lead to some kind of fratricidal war or conflict amongst them, we are not seeing that. We are not seeing that that eventually, there'll be one group which is able to, undermine all the other groups and have a hegemony or something. I think they have created their own niches of operation. What the ISKP is capable of, Taliban is not capable of, or what the Al Qaeda is capable of, the ISKP may not be capable of. So I think somewhere, the way they operate, they allow space for the other to, as long as they don't clash. But in terms of resources, in terms of sustenance, I have a feeling it's more or less the same. I mean, it's not that they're getting the sustenance from different sources. It's all from the same source.
Right. There is a Chinese proverb that comes to my mind that two tigers can't stay on the same mountain. In this case, there are multiple targets. The mountain is getting smaller, and the tigers they are accumulating at a very accelerated pace. Uh, there are a lot of people here, especially the ones that work on Pakistan. They might want to ask you questions. Before I do that, I'm going to ask you two last questions, and these are theoretical in nature, so I've kept them to the last. One, I would want you to reflect on that. There was a time when professionals from the subcontinent, I'm talking about India, Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bhutan, but largely India and Pakistan, and to some extent Bangladesh, but Bangladesh was a new entrant. You had a lot of these, bureaucrats of some way, shape, or form who would go on to multilateral institutions. And at that point of time, both India and Bangladesh, but largely India, was a closed off economy. So, this was a great exposure to these bureaucrats who went to places like the World Bank, the IMF, the Asian Development Bank, so on and so forth. And they would have a lot of Pakistani colleagues. And the Pakistani colleagues would then either choose to stay back in those countries and then get on to different things, be part of a think tank and so on and so forth, or they would come back and would bring in a breath of fresh air to the Pakistani economy, state, and society. You had a lot of people who did this, and then you have them turning into writers and artists, so on and so forth. And then their kids who were exposed to this globalized world, they would go on to do something better. For example, Fatima Bhutto, she has had a very sort of a sad childhood, but Fatima Bhutto is very different from the breed of other Pakistani women, but for the exposure she got about the world. And there are many, many such names. Today, and I was analyzing this before I got onto this call because this is something that has fascinated me. The number of Pakistani bureaucrats or diplomats who are eligible for this is still the same, but the numbers are shrinking. They're not going anywhere. And it's not like they're not trying. For example, the number of Pakistani technocrats in ADB in proportion has come down significantly. Same thing for the World Bank. It has come down significantly. If you look at the South Asian directorate, you will find people from other nationalities well represented rather than Pakistan. Think tank circuit also in the globalized world, you have the usual suspects from Pakistan, people who've been part of it for a very, very long time. So does this somehow mean that the bureaucracy in Pakistan, which used to be capable, which used to be well educated, administratively better, is the institutional capacity of the bureaucratic regime of Pakistan failing as well?
Well, Amogh, I'll have to speak without data on that because I don't know what kind of representation there is. But the final point that you made, that is there a kind of a failure by them? Well, you know, the general reaction would be actually, in Pakistan, most of the institutions are failing. So it's not that the military is military holds the same um, old glory, or the bureaucracy. There are a lot of changes within that society. I mean, the recruitment patterns to both the military and the bureaucracy is also changing. So you do have now people within the military and bureaucracy who've come from a much more, moderate backgrounds and all. So there is a bit of a class shift in the patterns of recruitment for this. But I don't know whether that would be a cause for the kind of presence or representation of Pakistani bureaucrats, economists, etc., in the various, multilateral institutions or financial institutions. I mean, you do still see a lot of them there in the private sectors, leading companies and all. Obviously, I mean, if one compares the diasporic presence of Pakistanis to the diasporic presence of Indians in some of the leading, private sector organizations, or the World Bank, IMF, is certainly much less. But they're still there, and I mean, if you meet the current, current set of recruits uh, to the foreign service, to the police service, you still find, I mean, you will still find a lot of idlers within the police, within the civil services. Uh, it's just that they cannot function. Uh, and that is because the way the institutions uh, within Pakistan cannot grow or cannot be autonomous of the clutch or hold of the military, which has actually been one of the major issues why the other services are not able to perform. And what we do not know outside is the kind of clashes that are there between the military and the police. The police, which I mean, some of them, of course, because I'm also talking on the basis of what I've been reading. I mean, there's a fantastic book called The Faltering State, written by one very well-known, popular police officers. His full name is some Mr. Khosla. Um, Now he had a running battle always with the military, because the way they were supporting the uh, militants or terrorist groups, or the training, or um, uh, the involvement of the military, and which does create a lot of law and order problems which the police has to deal with. So this is an aspect which doesn't get discussed too much outside. But there is always these run-ins between the bureaucracy, the civil services, and the military, the police, and the military within Pakistan. So it's all a reflection of some kind of institutional decline. I mean, it's only if the economy is growing, and the economy in the last few years, ensures that the Pakistani state is not able to do a lot of things, whether it's got to do with security, whether it's got to do with projects, whether it's got to do with relations. So many things get affected by the simple fact that you have literally an economic crisis on your hands. So it does not allow you to function. Um, in a way where you can plan for things. So we haven't discussed the economy much, but the economy is something which is, I mean, that's going to be the major serious challenge for the incumbent government, how they're going to manage the debt they have. It just doesn't give us any indication as to how for the next 3 years or 4 years they will be managed to get rid of the debt that the country is under. So all these things together, I think somewhere uh, does create, I mean, you cannot think of Pakistan currently as a normal state, a state which is like any other modernizing state with fairly independent institutions, and takes its place in the committee of nations in the world. Uh, Obviously, all this has an implication for its economy, domestic politics, for its foreign relations. And on all front, you can see that the country is going through a crisis. So to expect that some of the old patterns or trends would remain the same when there is such serious changes at multiple levels in the country. So I don't think so. I mean, if there are changes which you observe, I don't have the data, but I think
Neither do I. I was just doing an anecdotal because
partly what
there's
you're
a
saying is
story that I've done.
it's true. It's true. We may not have the data, but it's certainly showing signs of decline.
This is something that we want to do as Asia at the think tank. But last question before I open it up, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would have questions. Um, I'm a big fan of Loose Talk, sort of a television show that used to air in Pakistan. I think everybody in India is. And therefore, because of the sort of urging of our chair, who's been asking me to get a little bit into Urdu, I've been getting into listening to some fantastic stuff from Pakistan every once in a while. And there was a podcast interview of Anwar Maqsood Saab, who is one of the writing duo of, he was the writer and then he was also part of the Loose Talk for a very long time. And he's a very fascinating character in all of this. He's a poet, he's a painter, he's a television writer, a man of impeccable tastes all around. This was an interview given to a YouTube channel, and also I think a television channel called Raftar, which is a Pakistani channel which makes very fascinating documentaries on state of Pakistan. There's a podcast, I think 2-3 months old, where he's asked to reflect about the state of Pakistan, and he says two very interesting things. One, he says, and I'm quoting him in my best impression of Urdu, which could go all right. So, सिर्फ बम बना लिया है और कुछ नहीं. And second, he says that Jamhuriyat or democracy, he has lost faith in it because everything is rigged. Imran Khan, the Pakistani election process, and now they're just looking for a religious leader. He did not call him Maulvi, he used the colloquial word, which I will not be using here, and or a general, a new kind of a general. And in all of this, because you talked about economy, so the third thing that he kind of refers to every once in a while are the Chinese. So there is a state of hopelessness, even in a person who's been very hopeful about the state of Pakistan, and he's very hopeful about the people and the country and so on and so forth. But this is a nuclear state, and everything that you have just told me based on your research and your work does not fill me with confidence about the capability of this nuclear state to maintain sovereignty. And then this brings me to last week. There was an attack on some Chinese workers, and the attack was roundly condemned by everybody. But then, day before yesterday, and it was in the works for a long time, the Chinese sent their own police people to investigate, not to be a participant or an observer to the investigation, to lead the investigation. And you spoke about how Gwadar does not even have one Pakistani national. It has Chinese workers. And there is no longer an America to fall back on for external security because the Americans have given up on Pakistan for more or less. I mean, unless Donald Trump comes back and he does something Trumpy. But in all of this, and this is a theoretical question, and I know, and if there is no answer, that's absolutely fine. But would you say that suzerainty of Pakistan has slipped away from Pakistan?
Amogh, I'll break that question into two. One, I will like to talk about the Chinese presence in Pakistan, and later I'm going to go to Anwar Maqsood Saab. See, the Pakistan-China relationship is a very unequal relationship. Okay, it's a relationship of dependence. Whatever rhetoric there might be about this being sweeter than honey or bigger than the mountains or whatever, all that rhetoric. The fact is both the countries need each other, but the Pakistanis probably need the Chinese much more. There was a vision, a completely fallacious vision, that the CPEC would, be a completely transformative for Pakistan, almost like a Marshall Plan. It's going to completely change Pakistan economically. But the CPC till today is, mired in opaqueness. No one is very clear as to what are the terms and conditions of the CPC. What the Chinese are, getting out of it. But what is very clear today, one, that the data, all the Chinese investments are basically loans. So what has happened is, over a period of time now, Pakistan owes China about roughly $27 billion, which is 4 times more than what Pakistan owes the IMF. It owes about $7 billion to IMF. The overall debt that Pakistan has, external debt, is something around 127 or 130 billion dollars. So $27 billion out of that is like 1/5 of the debt which they owe. How are you going to get rid of this debt to China or to your external funders when your foreign exchange reserve is right now, yesterday's data, is about $14 billion. So obviously, you have to go in for a another bailout package from the IMF, which they've already, talking about it publicly, another $6 or $6.5 billion package. That's still 20 billion. This year, Pakistan needs to service debt of about $25 billion. So it's a tough challenge. Now, the problems with China, I mean, on one side, the Pakistanis still see China as a benefactor. But things have not gone the way the Pakistanis had imagined, that by investing so much into infrastructure, it'll make a dramatic turnaround in their economy. That's not happened. On top of that, it has only led to the increase of the debt crisis, which has become circular now, in the sense that the debt has gone so high that you need more debt to recycle this debt. The Chinese have, to a certain extent, recycled roughly about $5 billion in the last couple of years for Pakistan. But they have not given the Pakistanis any kind of debt relief. In fact, the Chinese also are having second thoughts, so they have also slowed down on their investments because they know that I mean there are problems of getting returns from the kind of economy that Pakistan has become. So the Chinese still play a very important role, or Pakistan dependency on them has increased, and the Chinese have been very sensitive to the fact of the number of attacks which are being carried out on the Chinese workers. There was another issue on which there hasn't been much of problem, and that was the groups like IMU and all, which were at one point of time, also based in North Waziristan, South Waziristan, and the links with the Uyghur nationalists. The Chinese have essentially ensured that the Pakistanis do not give any space for any of the Uyghur militants to be in to train. I think at some point of time the Pakistanis managed to push them out, and they've gone and probably based in the Fargana Valley or somewhere. So the Chinese have been very sensitive to that and to the number of the attacks that have been carried out on Chinese workers, engineers, and last year or 2022 attack in Karachi on a Confucius Institute, where I think 3 or 4 teachers were killed. So when the CPC started, one of the things that the Chinese demanded was that you first create a separate force to look after the security of the Chinese workers. I think now that security force is roughly about 10,000. So there is a separate security force dedicated to ensuring the security of the Chinese workers. But I don't know whether, the kind of terrorist attacks which are being carried out, whether it would be easy to provide foolproof security to the Chinese workers. Whenever these attacks happen, obviously, there is a lot of problems within the Chinese government in Pakistan. And as you said now that they want to investigate it. But the point is, what is the point in investigating? The point is whether you'll be able to avoid it, whether you'll be able to ensure that such an attack does not happen in the future. Here, the normal justice process doesn't benefit you. You can find out who was behind the attack and carry out justice. But does that ensure that these attacks are not going to happen in the future? How do you ensure that the BLA is not going to carry out such attacks? How do you ensure? So there the Pakistanis are in a bit of a trouble that they will not be able to, in my understanding, satisfy the Chinese on this count, because as I said earlier, this is going to grow. These attacks are only going to grow, and these attacks on the Chinese are also going to grow because both sides have issues. Both sides, meaning the BLA and the TTP, have issues with the Chinese presence in Pakistan. Now, this is something which I don't think so the Chinese understand. The Chinese thing, this is like law and order issue, which you can tackle through using the strong arm machinery of the state, but it doesn't work like that. So this is going to create some problems to the Pakistan government in the future. The second thing, Anwar Maqsood Saab, Um, uh, you see, I always felt that, the satire in Pakistan is much better than what we have in India. And the reason for that is, when you have a system which lacks freedom of expression, um, I think this satire and all became very important when the military regimes were in power, and under General Jia, you found that there was a lot of satire, and very interesting to note that Pakistani satire is much more evolved than what we have in India. And Anwar Maqsood was one of them, who was, the kind of satire he did, which was not slapstick, uh, very intellectual. Uh, but satire, I mean, good satire has to be, you know, intellectual, speak to the issues, speak to the contemporary issues, and which, his programs used to have. I'm forgetting the name of the program, which continued series he had.
Loose talk. Loose talk.
Loose talk, which is very popular, even in India.
India.
I see that happening in India now, that satire is beginning to, emerge. The way, it's already there as a great art form in Pakistan. So whatever he said about the quote you gave uh, may sound humorous, but it actually reflects the reality of Pakistani politics, or the dilemma of the Pakistani public, which thinks that, with the kind of things happening around, they're basically expecting that someone should come and deliver it for them. And at some point of time, it was Imran Khan, Masiah, who had come and who's going to deliver the country out of its troubles. But now what we realize is the Masiah is behind bars. Pakistan is back to its old ways, as usual. So thank you, Amogh, for that question. If there are any more questions, we can take up.
I think we've all learned a great deal this afternoon. I have two statements and one question. The first statement is that I think the world, not only Pakistan and India, but the world will be in great trouble if Pakistani general would be in the same genre as General Zia or worse. Zia was in much better times, but today, if Pakistan were to have a general of the same genre, then we'd all be in grave trouble, number one. Number two, the reason why I think Nawaz Sharif, our good friend, has not chosen to be prime minister, because he knows the legacy and history of prime ministers. He doesn't want to go back to jail. Let Shahbaz have a taste of jail after 3-4 years. So that would be better. And because this fellow was languishing away first in Saudi Arabia, then in London, nobody to take care of him, and Shahbaz was having a wonderful time. My question is, Al-Qaeda. When Al-Qaeda were actually operating in Afghanistan, and Osama had fled into the Tora Bora and later into Pakistan. The Taliban never liked the Al-Qaeda. When Osama came with Al-Qaeda, the Arabs particularly were better equipped, they were better clothed, they were better fed, and they had better armaments. They had a guarantee of money coming in from Osama. Whereas the Taliban, as we say, were Buka Nanga soldiers who had come from the raw field. They never liked them. So it only leaves me wondering that with Osama not on the scene anymore, how is Al-Qaeda being fed? I mean, Ayman Zawahiri is dead. Their leadership is decimated. They don't have contracts in Saudi Arabia anymore. So Al-Qaeda, how are they managing to sustain themselves in a country like Afghanistan or even Northwest Pakistan, without a leadership or without money.
So that I agree with both of your the first two statements. I mean, one can get into them, but they're profound statements which reflect, in some senses, very interesting political dynamics. But regarding the Al Qaeda, it's not the same Al Qaeda which was there earlier. The 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 differences, I think, in the organizational structure, where it's become more like a network, not a organization with a clear hierarchy. But I think that is one way in which many of these organizations are multiplying or sustaining, where even if you manage to take out the leadership, the organization does not have a setback, because most of these organizations we know do not have a clear hierarchy of leadership also, and yet they function. That's because they are cells which operate independent of each other. And for security reasons also, it is helpful, because then it's very difficult to destroy these organizations. So I'm talking on the basis of how terrorist organizations now do not have very clear hierarchical structures, but they're more based on cells which network with each other. There are small groups which have their own independent sources of revenue, etc. But this is where I feel there is a lot of collaboration between them. It's not as if these groups or networks can function without support, without some collaboration with other groups. And the sources, or one of the questions that I think which you're raising is, where are the revenues coming from? Where are the financial sources? I think the financial sources is still from wealthy Arabs, from civil society groups, which are funding in the impression or imagination of spreading Islam. A lot of that money has come to all of them, Al Qaeda, to Taliban, and to some of the other groups. So that is how I think these groups are surviving, functioning. But I don't think so they're monolithic groups. I mean, I don't think so the Al Qaeda is a monolithic group the way probably it was under Bin Laden. And the same, I mean, we also do not know much about the ISKP leadership. That's because they don't project themselves like that, or they don't want to be projected in the media. These are shadowy groups, or you only come to know about them when they are able to carry out some terrorist attack. Otherwise, you don't hear about them. We don't know the leadership. But there are ways in which they function. I mean, I mean, some of the ways in which we saw how the Taliban was able to sustain itself in Afghanistan by taxing the common people, or taxing business, taxing transport. So some of these other groups probably also must be doing a lot of these things. If I look at how the LTT used to raise resources for itself, from the diaspora community, from extortions, and some of them actually have investments in stock markets and proper business. Actually, it's a very murky world. So if you get into that, how terrorists raise funds, it's a pretty murky world out there. I mean, they raise funds from illegitimate sources and legitimate sources also. So it's a completely different field which we have to enter to understand how these groups are still able to carry out the kind of operations they're able to do.
So now that the Taliban are not allowing this opium business, how are they getting funds? I mean,
That's
the
not true.
government.
That's not true.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
not true. In fact, the nature of
Yeah.
the drugs has changed. They're into,
Mhm.
uh, they're into artificial drugs, which are much more expensive in the market. But the opium business is also not completely stopped. While they've given statements to that effect, but the opium production still continues. And this is a problem in the Afghan agriculture, that even if the Taliban wants to stop opium production, the farmer doesn't have much of a choice. The farmer grows poppy because he cannot. I mean, poppy is very easy to cultivate. I mean, it doesn't require much of effort. It doesn't require water or fertilizer. So a lot of them actually grow poppy and survive on that. But then that by the end of it, enters the market.
Some of our youngsters here may not know, but we in India legitimately allow the growth of opium. I mean, the entire Mandsaur area, West Madhya Pradesh, is full of poppy and opium. But I have an interesting story to tell you about the Taliban in Afghanistan. I was actually traveling from Kabul to Sheberghan once, and I stopped by in General Dostum's castle. It was a palace, it was a castle, and he was there. So there were a lot of young soldiers. And Dostum, as you know, had been anti the Al Qaeda. So there was a young soldier, and he had deep wounds along his neck, a big scar on his neck and his chest. And he was youngster, he was a 23, 24-year-old boy. So I asked him, "Ye kya hua tumhe?" And he said that the Al Qaeda had attacked us, had attacked this castle. And they came and they were dressed in their white clothes like Arabs. And I said, "Did you kill some?" He said, "Yet beshumar." So I killed many. And then I said, "Ye kya hua?" So he said, "Well, they shot me, they bayoneted me. And Dostum sent me to Tashkent, where I was operated, and that's why I am here."
Thank you, Professor, for taking the time out. This was an illuminating interview about a
Very
country.
fascinating.
Thank
Very
you very
That
much.
is,
fascinating.
Thank you very
that
much
has
for
been,
the invitation. I also enjoyed the discussion. It helped me reflect on a lot of issues. Thank
So
you.
you're
Well-
fabulous, sir. You're fabulous. Very nice. Thank you.
Pakistan has been hanging by a thread for some time, and the thread is getting weaker every day. So it's an interesting thing to watch out what happens. But thank you for doing this, and I'm pretty sure there's the room for a third one as well. But thank you so much for it today.
Thank you very much. Bye, sir.